Hey y'all, and welcome to a special episode of Flick Connection, where I'm going to tell you about 10 of the most psychotic movies included with Paramount Plus.
Groovy.
What?
It's groovy being insane, man. Where you at?
It's not groovy to be insane.
But this is also the first time I'm doing a full video dedicated to Paramount Plus, so later in this episode I'm also going to show you a bunch of the movies and shows included with Paramount Plus so you can decide if it's something you want to sign up for. Even though this video is in no way sponsored by Paramount Plus, it is sponsored by Skillshare, but we'll talk more about them in a bit. First, we're going to start with my number 10 pick, which is one of the lesser known movies on this list, even though it stars Jeffrey Rush, The Best Offer. Now, part of the reason this isn't a very well-known movie is it's fairly old-fashioned. Even for a movie released over 10 years ago, it feels pretty old-fashioned. In fact, it feels a lot like an Alfred Hitchcock flick. But the basic setup here is that he is a fine art appraiser, and as he's appraising a bunch of stuff at this massive estate, he notices a woman hidden inside of a secret room with a small hole in the wall. She'll talk to him, but she refuses to come out, and the mystery of this woman begins to drive him crazy, and he gradually becomes more and more obsessed with this woman. Now, she's actually played by Sylvia Hoeks, who you might recognize as Love from Blade Runner 2049. She's fantastic in this movie, and even though it's slow-paced and pretty old-fashioned, I would say if you like Alfred Hitchcock-style thrillers, then The Best Offer is a great one. Next up, I've got a weird Joaquin Phoenix double feature, with my next pick being the newest movie on this list, Beau is Afraid.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
Now listen closely, because this is not a movie I recommend for most people watching, but some of you are going to love it. This is the latest film from director Ari Aster, who previously did Hereditary and Midsommar, but Beau is Afraid is really not like either of those movies. Even though it's dark and creepy at times, it's not a horror movie per se. No, this one's so weird it's difficult to explain, but it will appeal to people who like really weird movies, and I mean really weird stuff, especially weird stuff that makes you think and just doesn't feel like anything you've ever seen before. Beau is Afraid is definitely that, and there's a lot of meat on the bone. You can actually glean a lot from this movie if you can get into it, but the visual presentation and I guess the style of this movie is really coarse. Like, it's off-putting on purpose, and it's one of the things that, help drive the point of this movie home. But I've only talked about this movie once before on the channel. I said it then, and I'll say it again. I'll never be able to look at Parker Posey the same way again. But my next Joaquin Phoenix pick is one of the weirdest movies. I'll go ahead and say it's the weirdest movie ever directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, Inherent Vice. Now, part of the reason this is so weird is it's actually based on a novel by the same name that was written by Thomas Pynchon, and even though I've never read his work, apparently it's difficult, damn near impossible to translate to screen, and then you get a big-time director like Paul Thomas Anderson who wants to take a crack at it. But this is kind of a neo-noir stoner flick, very much in the vein of The Big Lebowski. I would say it's not as funny or as fun as The Big Lebowski, maybe not even nearly as rewatchable, but it is funny. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix gives an amazing comedic performance. He's one of the best in the game right now, but you've also got Josh Brolin with his chocolate banana. And Martin Short is just a coked out dentist in this movie, and he's fantastic. Visually, the movie's actually really impressive and has a lot of trippy, interesting elements, but it's kind of a mess as well. If you don't mind the mess and you like weird stuff, then this movie might be right up your alley.
I get you!
Now, my next two picks also make a great double feature of creepy roadside motel movies, but something I recommend just as strongly as these movies is today's sponsor, Skillshare. Now, back when I had a crazy idea to start a YouTube channel, I knew nothing about video production and had to teach myself everything, not just video production, but everything I needed to know to be able to run this channel successfully. It took a long time, and I could have learned it a lot faster using Skillshare's library. And that's because Skillshare is the largest online learning community featuring thousands of classes from professionals in different fields like filmmaking, illustration, freelance work, productivity, and a lot more. And yes, there's a lot of free content available. I mean, heck, a lot of it's available right here on YouTube, and I've used a lot of it, but Skillshare is a lot different. And that's because Skillshare has nothing but premium content that's been vetted, and they've curated it into different learning paths, which allows you to tear through nothing but top quality educational content on whatever skills you're wanting to improve. Just a couple of months ago, I spent several hours learning how to improve my editing skills, and just in the past couple of months, I've already saved more time than I spent learning how to sharpen those skills with Skillshare. In fact, I use the AI program Midjourney to help me develop all of the t-shirt designs available over at DarrenVanDam.com. Skillshare even offers classes on how to improve your Midjourney skills, something I'm actively doing to create even better merch in my store. So if you've got some skills you're wanting to improve over the summer, take advantage of Skillshare and take advantage of their special offer. The first 500 viewers that use the link in the video description down below are going to get a full free month of Skillshare, and there's no limit to how much you can consume and learn during that free month. It's a great deal. Again, to get it, use my link in the video description below. But speaking of great stuff, let's talk about the remaining Paramount Plus movies on this list. But next up, like I said, we've got a couple of creepy roadside motel movies, starting with Vacancy. This stars Kate Beckinsale, Luke Wilson, and Brad from Pulp Fiction.
What?
I said Brad from Pulp Fiction. What's so great about Vacancy is it delivers exactly what you would expect. A couple pulls over to a creepy roadside motel during a storm. When they check into a room they don't even want to pull the sheets back on, they discover they're in a much worse place than just a dirty motel room. And the rest of the movie is them trying to escape. This movie actually has Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes. At times, it reminds me a little bit of the movie Joyride. If anything, it's probably a little bit scarier, and that's why I recommend this movie. It's effective at creeping you out, but it also makes for a really tense thriller. It doesn't ever go into just awful, terrible, off-putting horror directions. It's actually pretty accessible, considering how creepy it ultimately gets. Now next up, we've got another one that takes place at a seedy roadside motel during a storm, but that's about all these two movies have in common, other than the fact that the titles rhyme. In Identity, you follow a group of people who actually end up at this motel all on the same night and begin to discover this really deep mystery. In fact, the mystery is so deep and filled with so many twists, I actually don't consider this movie to be highly rewatchable. Most of the payoff is in all of the big surprises in store for you. And let's not forget the stacked cast with this movie. I mean, Ray Liotta, John Hawkes, Amanda Peet, Alfred Molina, and John Cusack, who's okay in the movie, I guess. So this is one I highly recommend for people who have never seen it, and tepidly recommend for people who have. But even though my next pick features a bunch of twists as well, I consider it to be much more rewatchable. It's the now Christian Bale cult classic, The Machinist. Like I said, this too has a really deep mystery. You spend the entire movie peeling back all the layers of that onion, and it's well worth it once you get to the middle. But there's something about this movie that makes it more rewatchable. I think it's the style, the performance from Christian Bale, the dramatic weight loss, and also the ups and downs of the story are interesting enough to rewatch multiple times. In fact, I've seen this movie at least 4 times. I've enjoyed it every time. And if you're new to the movie, you've never seen it before, you don't know anything about it, there's no CGI. Christian Bale actually lost all of that weight for this movie. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and so is putting all the weight back on like he did. I mean, supposedly he looked like this about 6 months later, which just doesn't even sound possible to me. I don't care what you're putting into your body. That's a wild transformation. Now, director Sam Raimi is most famous for the Evil Dead movies and maybe the first Spider-Man trilogy, but he also did a great thriller titled A Simple Plan. But a long-forgotten mystery movie he did is titled The Gift. And not only is it a fantastic Sam Raimi flick, but it has a stacked cast. We're talking Cate Blanchett, Hilary Swank, Katie Holmes, Greg Kinnear, a handful of great character actors, and Keanu Reeves as a bad guy, something you don't see very often. But in The Gift, Cate Blanchett actually plays like a medium or at least a tarot card reader in Louisiana. At least I think it's Louisiana. It's the Deep South. And while the movie seemingly does have some supernatural elements, in fact, it's got a little bit of a Sixth Sense vibe, but it's actually just a gothic mystery movie set in this Spanish moss-covered setting. Like a lot of the movies on this list, it features plenty of twists and turns, but is really just a solid Sam Raimi flick again with an incredible cast. Now next up, we've got far and away the creepiest one on this list, and it's one of the most messed up movies that mass audiences ever consumed, at least it's up there, Event Horizon. It's also worth noting that this movie was panned by critics when it was released. You can read a lot of bad reviews on this movie, but it has held up over time because it is excellent and audiences have ultimately embraced this flick. In fact, it's a really great detailed video on it over on the Good Bad Flicks YouTube channel. The backstory of how this movie got made is pretty interesting. And it too is a visually stunning movie, especially for something so macabre and dark. It's got just this stunning look to it, and most of it doesn't feel very dated at all. There's a few CGI shots that stand out, but this is deep space horror almost at its finest. I would say Alien is probably the best deep space horror movie ever made, and honestly, Event Horizon is a close runner-up. Now, because I know a lot of you subscribe to my channel to try to figure out which streaming services to sign up for, so you're not having to pay for all of them at once, this is my first time doing Paramount Plus, so I want to show you what all they have to offer, because it's a lot. Again, they don't sponsor this channel in any way, shape, or form, but it's such a strong streaming service, it's high time I've recommended it. At this point, they have folded in Showtime, some CBS stuff, Nickelodeon, MTV, BET, and Comedy Central. Now, they don't have everything that those networks have ever offered, but they have a lot of it. So if you like any of the older shows from any of those networks, they live here on Paramount Plus. But because they folded in Showtime, they've also got a ton of really great movies. We're talking big blockbuster movies. They've got a bunch of Tom Cruise's biggest movies. And I may not be talking about them here, but you can see they've got a really robust library. And because of Nickelodeon, they tend to offer more stuff for kids than a lot of other streaming services. And they still offer a really low price. The price will likely change over time as they're adding more and more. But right now, there's kind of a sweet spot where you can get a good price with a lot of content loaded onto Paramount Plus. But my number 2 pick on this list, I will admit, is one I not only didn't really like when it was released, I was actually disappointed by it, but over time I have grown to love 7 Psychopaths.
You want to go to the bathroom, clean some of the blood and the puke off you?
Now this is from writer-director Martin McDonagh, who also did In Bruges, which also stars Colin Farrell. Another movie I really wanted to like and just did not get it when it was originally released. Both movies have grown on me almost more than any other movie ever has been able to grow on me. The kind of dark, cynical humor that both of those movies have, though, I have really grown to love. And I'm not someone who's a cynical person even, but I find the cynicism in these movies to be absolutely hilarious. And it's now one of my favorite characters Sam Rockwell has ever portrayed. If anything, he kind of outshines Colin Farrell, who's great as well, Woody Harrelson, who's maybe even better. I mean, for someone who loves classic gangster movies, this is kind of the post-classic gangster movie. You've even got Christopher Walken a little bit. He's not in the movie as much as you would hope. I mean, hell, I almost forgot Tom Waits has got a wild scene in it. I mean, I just love every little nook and cranny Martin McDonagh made with this movie. I consider it to be highly rewatchable. If you typically like dark comedy like I do, or if you have a love for gangster movies, there's just so much to enjoy with 7 Psychopaths. And then on a list of psycho movies, I've got just one of the most psychotic but also enjoyable movies I've ever seen and ever reviewed on this channel, Jacob's Ladder. Released in 1990, Jacob's Ladder is still, to this day, the best movie of its kind. And what kind of movie is it? Well, it is a descent into hell in this movie, basically. Tim Robbins actually plays a postman who begins seeing things, and he's not sure if he's having visions or if they're real, and it's subtle things, like someone on the subway looks like they might have a tail. A nurse at a hospital looks like she might have a horn underneath her hair. And the movie's very effective at conveying this stuff. It's a visually stunning movie, even though it's insanely dark. But just like some of the more mysterious movies on this list, all of this dark, creepy stuff happening to him is a mystery that he has to solve by the end of the movie. And mystery-wise, it's a great one. It's got a hell of an impact, and even though, yes, it's technically, I guess, a twist, the movie is highly rewatchable and visually just incredibly stunning, not just for a movie from 1990, but again, for a movie that's so dark and creepy, it just has this almost beautiful look to it. And even though I recommend all of the movies on this list, Jacob's Ladder takes the cake and is one that I highly recommend for anyone that made it this far in the video. You want to watch some psycho stuff that's also in just a really great movie, Jacob's Ladder is kind of unparalleled. But that is the list. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring another video. Don't forget to check out their link in the video description down below, or go to DarrenVanDam.com. There's a link down there as well. You can sign up for my free email newsletter, Flicks of the Week. You'll get a really quick read of an email in your inbox once a week with 5 recommendations from me that are things I typically don't recommend here on the channel, like new releases. But I'll keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thank you for checking out this special Paramount Plus episode, and you will see me on the next one.